The message came early that morning. Be here by 6 p.m. Family meeting. Important. No explanation. No context. Just a time and a tone that didn't invite questions. I stared at the text for a few seconds before locking my phone. I already knew what kind of meeting this would be. Not a discussion. Not a conversation. A performance. The kind where the outcome is decided long before anyone walks into the room. Still, I went. The house looked exactly the same when I arrived. Same driveway, same front door, same carefully maintained appearance that had always mattered more than anything happening inside. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything felt different. The living room was already full. Relatives sitting in a half circle, conversations low, controlled, waiting. My brother stood near the center, relaxed, confident, exactly where he always seemed to be when attention was involved. My parents were seated at the front, positioned like they were about to present something important. And me? There was a chair off to the side. Of course there was. Glad you could make it, my mother said, her tone neutral but pointed enough to carry meaning. We didn't want to start without you. I nodded once and took the seat. Because I understood something they didn't. This wasn't my moment. It was theirs. And I was just part of the setup. We'll keep this straightforward, my father began, leaning forward slightly, his hands clasped together like he was about to explain something reasonable. As a family, we've been dealing with financial pressure. A few relatives nodded sympathetically. Of course they did. That was the narrative. Maintaining this house isn't easy, he continued. Costs have gone up. Responsibilities have increased. And not everyone has contributed the way we expected. There it was. Not direct. Not yet. But close enough. My brother shifted slightly, not uncomfortable, just aware of the direction this was going. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. We've decided, my mother added, stepping in smoothly, that the best decision for everyone is to sell the house. Murmurs filled the room. Concern. Agreement. Quiet approval. The kind of reaction that comes when people are given a conclusion instead of a question. And then, they made it clear. We can't carry everything alone, my father said, his voice tightening just enough. Some of us have stable careers. Some of us don't. A few glances. Subtle, but intentional. And when one person chooses a path that doesn't contribute, my mother continued, it affects the entire family. There it was. Now it wasn't subtle anymore. It was directed, structured, designed. My brother finally spoke, his tone measured, careful, like he was trying to sound reasonable. It's not about blaming anyone, he said. It's just about reality. Stability matters. Stability. Another word that sounded better than what it meant. The room leaned into it. Conversations forming quietly, people nodding, reinforcing the story being built in front of them. And for the next hour, they continued, not shouting, not arguing, just presenting my failed freelance work, my inconsistent income, my lack of responsibility. Each point delivered calmly, supported by examples, framed in a way that made it sound objective instead of personal. But it was personal, completely. And the worst part? They believed it, because from their perspective, it was true. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct anything they said. I just sat there, listening, watching, letting it unfold exactly the way they needed it to. Because timing matters, and reacting too early ruins everything. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the words. Not because they didn't matter, but because I already knew how this would end. My phone was in my hand, screen dim, notifications silent. To anyone watching, it probably looked like I had checked out. Like I wasn't even engaged enough to respond. That helped, because underestimation creates space, and I needed space. Finally, my father leaned back slightly, signaling the end of it. We're not saying this lightly, he said. But this is the reality we're dealing with. Silence followed, not empty, expectant, because now, it was my turn, or at least, that's what they thought. I looked up slowly, meeting their eyes one by one, not challenging, not emotional, just present. Then I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to change the position of the room. And then I asked the one question they weren't ready for. If you're so broke, I let the words hang for just a second, not for effect, but for clarity. Because sometimes, the space between words matters more than the words themselves. Then where has the $1,250 I've been depositing into your account every week for the last 2 years been going? The room didn't react immediately. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, because understanding doesn't hit all at once. It builds, slowly. Relatives glanced at each other first, confused, unsure if they had heard it correctly. My brother's expression shifted, just slightly, like something didn't add up anymore. And my parents, they froze, not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. What are you talking about? My mother asked, her voice tighter now, controlled in a way it hadn't been before. I didn't rush to answer. I took a step forward, placing my phone on the table in front of them, the screen lighting up with a list of transactions. Dates, amounts, consistent, unbroken, every week, for 2 years. I'm talking about this, I said calmly. My father leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he looked at the screen. For a second, he didn't speak. Then his jaw tightened. That's not, he started, but stopped. Because it was. Anonymous transfers, I added. Same account, same timing, every week. The room shifted again, not quietly this time. Whispers, confusion, pieces connecting. You knew? My brother asked, looking between them, his confidence no longer as steady as it had been an hour ago. They didn't answer him, because they couldn't, not without saying something they didn't want to say out loud. I didn't think it mattered, I continued, my tone still even, still controlled. As long as things were handled, as long as the house stayed, as long as you didn't have to worry. Silence, heavy, real, because now, the narrative they had built was breaking. You're lying, my mother said quickly, but there was no conviction behind it. Just resistance. I didn't react to that. I just scrolled. More transactions, more proof, more time. This started 2 years ago, I said. Right around the time you said things were getting difficult. My father leaned back slowly, his posture no longer the same as it had been when the meeting started. Why didn't you say anything? He asked. That question almost made me pause. But not for the reason he thought. Because it wasn't about credit, I replied. It was about responsibility. Another silence, longer this time, because now, they didn't have control of the story anymore. My brother sat back in his chair, looking at them differently now. Not with admiration, not with certainty, just questioning. You said we were struggling, he said, quieter now. You said we had no support. No one answered him, because there was no answer that worked anymore. I picked my phone up again and slid it back into my pocket. And now, I added, you're saying you need to sell the house. My mother's hands tightened slightly in her lap. We didn't know it was you, she said, like that changed something. It doesn't matter if you knew, I replied. Because it didn't. What mattered was what they chose to say when they thought I had nothing. Another pause. And then I said the part they weren't ready for. I've stopped the transfers. The words landed harder than anything else. Because now, this wasn't about the past. It was about what came next. You can't just, my father started, but stopped again, catching himself, realizing how that sounded. I can, I said. And I could, because it was mine. But that's not the only thing that changed, I added. Their attention snapped back to me immediately. What do you mean? My brother asked. I looked around the room once, not for approval, not for validation, just to make sure everyone understood that this wasn't a private conversation anymore. Then I said it. I bought the mortgage. No build-up, no explanation, just truth. And this time, the silence was complete, because now, there was nothing left to interpret. No confusion, no misunderstanding, just reality. That's not possible, my mother whispered. It is, I replied. My father stared at me, not speaking, not moving, just processing something he had never considered before. The structure, the ownership, the control. You own the house? My brother asked. Not exactly, I said calmly. I own the debt, and that was more than enough. Because debt decides everything. The room felt different now. Not just quieter, smaller, like the space itself had shifted under the weight of what had just been said. You wouldn't do that to us, my mother said, her voice softer now, uncertain in a way I had never heard before. I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't know the answer, but because the answer mattered. I didn't do anything to you, I said finally. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else that had been said that night. You made your decision, I continued. I just adjusted mine. No one spoke after that, because there was nothing left to say. They had spent an hour explaining why I didn't matter, and in a few minutes, they learned exactly how much I did.